Hello, today we're going to learn how to convert fractions to decimals. For today's lesson, converting fractions to decimals, are no calculators allowed. So please make sure that you're working the problems out on paper. When you do this problem for state testing, you won't have calculators, so it's important that you begin to practice without a calculator. Okay, so for converting fractions to decimals, first off, there's a couple of things that you want to make sure that you remember, or maybe you need to review how to do. For converting fractions to fractions to decimals, you're going to need to be able to do long division and also subtracting with regrouping. So if you need to be able to borrow. If you need to review either of those two things, I have videos for you in the prior skills review section in Canvas. Okay. So please make sure that you are titling your page. The title of your page in this notebook is Converting Fractions to Decimals, and also put today's date. Okay, let's begin. Okay, so to convert fractions to decimals, this is what you want to write in your notebook here, right? We're going to be writing all of this here in your notebook. So if you need to pause the video, pause it, write it down so you can listen to me as we fill it in. Okay, so to convert fractions to decimals, when we're going to convert a fraction to a decimal, we're going to divide. So this is where we need the long division in. We're going to do a long division. And you're going to divide the numerator. So in our first box here, I'm going to write the word numerator by the denominator. Okay. So if you don't remember, the numerator is the number that's on top. The denominator is down on the bottom. I like to think of the letter D to remind that it's the one down on the bottom. And this is how you set up your long division here. So if you look, the numerator is being divided by the denominator. The number on the top is what goes on the inside when you set up your division. Okay. Once you set that up, you're going to do a long division. We'll practice that in a moment. And your answer is going to be in the form of a decimal. We have two types of decimals that we're going to be learning about in this video. They are called terminating decimals and repeating decimals. Let's take a look. The first type here, we have a decimal that ends. So it ends, it finishes, or terminates, is known as a terminating decimal. This is an important vocabulary word you need to know. Okay, so if it ends, it is a terminating decimal. Okay. So when you do the long division, if your answer your division ends with a 0, and at the top you just have a certain amount of digits that actually end, that has a last digit, that is called a terminating decimal. Okay? We'll take a look at some examples of a terminating decimal in a moment. When you're doing the division, you could also be in a situation where it doesn't seem to end. It keeps going and you keep getting the same number or pattern of numbers over and over again. So a decimal with a repeating block or a repeating pattern is known as just that, a repeating decimal. Okay. So for this standard, you are required to know that we have two types of decimals that are in this section. We have two types of decimals. One of them is the terminating decimal, and you should be able to recognize when you see a terminating decimal and also a repeating decimal. Okay. So let's take a look at this in action. So here we have an example of a fraction, and we need to write this fraction as a decimal. Let's come over here really quick and read this. It says, remember that the fraction bar, so the fraction bar that you see in between the 1 and the 4 here, the fraction bar, means divided by. So by this time, we should be aware that fractions represent division, and so that we read that as 1 divided by 4. Divide the numerator by the denominator, 1 divided by 4. Okay, so let's do this division. So I'm going to set up, I'm going to do it over here on the side. I'm going to set up my division. The numerator is going to go inside, so 1, the denominator on the outside, 4. And if you put up one finger and ask yourself, can I take 4 out of there? The answer will be no. 4 does not come out of 1. It comes out 0 times. So you put your 0, and at that point, put your decimal next to it. Okay? So now what do? We might be kind of stuck here because there's no other numbers. That's when we add another 0 inside. And we start dividing the numbers on the inside. So 10 divided by 4 we can do. And that will come out 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. We do our subtraction. 10 minus 8 gives us 2. I'm not at 0 yet. Nothing is repeating, so I'm going to add another 0, bring it down. Now I have a 20. 4 goes into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. I subtract, and I get to 0. The fact that I got to 0 tells me that this is a terminating decimal. I also know it's a terminating decimal because the answer finished at a certain number. So my answer for 1/4 is equal to 0.25. And this is a terminating decimal. Let's check our work and see what we've got here. Okay. Please be sure to write down any questions you might have in your notebook. Pause the video, rewind the video if you need to. Make sure you have all of these steps in your notebook. Any questions that you have, you can send them to me on our class remind page. You can also hold on to them, write them in your notebook, hold on to them, and you can bring them up when we go over these in class. Next, we're going to take a look at this next problem. Let me make this a little bit smaller. So we're going to take a look at our next problem here, and it is 1/3. So we're going to read the information here to the right, and it says divide until the remainder is 0 or until the digits in the quotient begin to repeat. And let's just start doing that. Okay, so we've got 1/3 this time. So a little bit smaller. So 1/3, I'm going to set up a division for that. And I'm going to put the numerator of 1 on the inside and the 3, the denominator on the outside. Again, ask yourself, how many times can I take 3 out of 1? 0 times. So I'll put my 0 and my decimal. Now I can add a 0 on the inside to make this 10 instead of a 1. So how many times can I take 3 out of 10? Well, 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. I subtract and I get a 1. Okay, so we got a 1. I'm going to keep going then. Well, this 1 won't work, so I need to put a 0 here, and now I get a 10. Okay. How many times will 3 come out of 10? 3 times. 3 times 3 equals 9. Subtract. And now this should seem a little suspicious. I had 10 minus 9, 10 minus 9. I have another 1 here, and if I add a 0, I can see I'm going to get a 10 again. Well, how many times will 3 go into 10? 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Now I am absolutely sure that this pattern is repeating. In other words, I can continue to do this division forever and it will never end. The fraction 1/3 will turn into the repeating decimal of 0.333 and it will go on forever. These three little dots after a number are called an ellipses, and it means that the number goes on forever and ever and never ends. Okay? So this is a repeating decimal. This is an example of a repeating decimal. Okay? And if we compare it to the one we did above, we had an ending to our division. It gave us a 0 at the end, and so we knew we were finished. When you're looking at a repeating decimal, you might not know if you're finished until you actually notice a pattern. In this particular problem, there's only one number that's repeating, is the number 3. You could have a pattern that's repeating of 2 or 3 or more numbers. So we'll practice these some more in class, but just know that sometimes you might have more than one number that's repeating and you've got to do a little bit more work until you're totally sure of which are the numbers that are repeating. Okay, so back to this problem. Our fraction 1/3 then, 1/3, let me move this over a little bit. My fraction 1/3 converts into the decimal 0.3, and instead of writing all of the 3's, I'm going to write the number that repeats, which is a 3, and I'm going to put a repeating bar over the number 3. Okay? So 1/3 is equal to 0.3 repeating. Let's take a look at the answer we had here. Okay? So here it is written in the textbook, and 1/3 is equal to 0.3 repeating. That little repeating bar will go over the digit or digits that are repeating. Okay. So sometimes you'll see the repeating information given through ellipses, and most often we'll use the repeating bar at the top above the number. All right, so now it's time for you to try. So let's start with this first problem here. 5/11, then 1/8, and 2 1/3. So please pause the video, try those 3 problems. Or you can try one at a time, and then we'll go over them together. So the first problem is 5/11, the first fraction. So we have 5/11. We're going to set up the long divisions with the 5 on the inside and the 11 on the outside. The numerator on the inside, denominator on the outside. Okay, so here we have 11 into 5 goes 0 times. So I have to add my decimal, and I will add a 0 here. Now 11, I can take 11 out of 50 4 times. 4 times 11 is 44. Subtract, and the difference is 6. I have to add a 0, and now I'm at a 60, I'm sorry, 60. 11 out of 60 will come out 5 times. 5 times 11 is 55. Subtract, my difference is a 5. Still not at 0, so I'm going to keep going. I don't see a pattern yet, so I'm going to keep going. And now I have a 50 here. Okay, there was a 50 here, 50 here. Let's see if the pattern continues. 11 out of 50, 4 times. 4 times 11 is 44. Subtract, and I get a 6. I'm going to add another 0, and I see a 60. Now I'm beginning to see a pattern emerging. Let's just finish it off and make sure. I'll do one more subtraction and see if I have a clear pattern. So 11 out of 60, 5 times 11 is 55. Subtract, And here I am at 5 again. So I can see the pattern emerging here. 50 minus 44, 60 minus 55, 50 minus 44, 60 minus 55. The pattern is emerging. And the numbers that are repeating are a 4 and a 5. Okay, it's just a 4 and a 5 is the pattern that is repeating. So this is going to be 0.45 repeating. Okay, and I would write that 0.45 repeating. Let me fix that for 45 repeating. Okay, and I would write the answer here. 5/11 is equal to 0.45 repeating. All right, 1/8. So if you haven't done this one, pause it now and do it, and I will do it with you. So 1/8. The numerator on the inside, the denominator on the outside. How many times will 1 come out of 8? Well, it won't. So I'm going to put a 0 in a decimal and add a 0 here. 8 from 10, I can take 1 time, subtract, and I get 2. Add a 0, 20. 8 out of 20, that's 2. 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract with a difference of 4. You can add another 0 here. 40. 8 times 5 will give me 40, and I subtract, and that is 0. Okay? So because this ends in 0, this is a terminating decimal, and 1/8 is equal to 0.125. Now, for number 3, if you're confused at number 3, I'll give you a hint, and then you pause and try it. For number 3, we have a mixed number, 2 1/3. You can think of this as the number 2 plus the fraction 1/3. So what that means is that you're going to take 1/3 and do your division for 1/3, and then instead of having a 0 before the decimal, we'd have a 2 in front of it. You try it. So I'm going to start with looking at the fraction of 2 1/3. And I'm going to change the 1/3 into a decimal. 1 on the inside, 3 on the outside. We've actually done this one already. We did 1/3 right up here. So this is the division for the 1/3. And 1/3 gave us 0.3 repeating. So I'm not going to do that division again. Just know that you would get 0.3333 and go on forever. So the way you want to do that is then add your 2 plus the 0.3 repeating. And when you add those two together, you just would have 2.3 repeating. So the answer here would be 2.3 repeating. Okay. Again, any questions you may have, please write them down in your notebook, send them to me on Remind, and we will go over them in class together. So what do I have for you here? Here you have 2 problems, 3/8 and 1/16. I would like for you to do those in your notebook. Tell me if they are repeating or terminating decimals. So you're going to do the long division for each of them. Show me your work, show me your steps, and tell me what the decimal that it is that they turn into. Also telling me, are they repeating or terminating decimals? Numbers 3 through 6, I'll show you in class and we'll do them together.